The fight happened right after the cameras stopped rolling. And what went down backstage at the UFC Apex last Saturday night was something nobody expected. Not from a manager, not after a big win, and definitely not directed at one of the most respected coaches in the entire sport. Let's get into it. Picture this. Saturday night at the Meta Apex in Las Vegas. The lights are still warm from the main event. The crowd is buzzing. Manel Kape just stopped Kyoji Horiguchi in the third round. A brutal TKO finish that almost certainly booked him a spot in the flyweight title picture. His team should be celebrating, hugging, screaming, popping bottles somewhere in the back. But instead, something else is happening in those tight, narrow hallways behind the scenes. Something darker. Something that nobody in that building was supposed to see. And when word started leaking out a few days later, it exploded across the entire MMA world. Here's what allegedly went down. And we're going to break down every single layer of this story, because there's a lot more to it than just a punch. So let's start from the top. Who are the two people at the center of this? First, you have Eric Nicksick. If you follow MMA at all, you know this name. Head coach of Extreme Couture in Las Vegas, one of the most well-known gyms in the sport. This is the man in the corner for Sean Strickland, the current UFC middleweight champion. He's coached Francis Ngannou. He's worked with top-level fighters across multiple weight classes. Ask anyone in the MMA community about Eric Nicksick, and the word you'll hear most is respected. This is not a guy who makes enemies. He's a coach's coach. A quiet professional. The kind of guy who shows up, does the work, and lets his fighters do the talking. Now on the other side, you have Ali Abdelaziz, the CEO of Dominance MMA Management, one of the most powerful managers in all of combat sports. His client list reads like a Hall of Fame roster. Islam Makhachev, Justin Gaethje, Belal Muhammad, Kamaru Usman, Khabib Nurmagomedov back in the day. This is a man with serious influence, serious connections, and a very colorful history both inside and outside of MMA politics. Here's where it gets strange. Both men were at the same event for the same reason, because they both work with Manel Kape. Kape trains at Extreme Couture. So Nicksick is his coach. And Kape is represented by Abdelaziz. So the manager is also there. On a night where their shared fighter just scored a huge win, these two men, who should have been on the same team, apparently ended up in a very bad situation. According to multiple sources who spoke to MMA Mania, and first reported by outlets The Starched and Blake Avignon on X, Ali Abdelaziz took a swing at Eric Nicksick backstage after the main event. The two were separated, and Abdelaziz was reportedly removed from the Meta Apex. Just let that sink in for a second. A manager swung at a coach, backstage, after their shared fighter just won the biggest fight of his career. Why? Nobody knows for sure. And that is the single most maddening part of this whole story. Nobody has officially explained what set this off. There's no video that's been released. There's no statement from Ali. There's no statement from Nicksick. The UFC has not commented. We're sitting with a confirmed altercation and a blank where the reason should be. But here's what we do know. And this is where the story gets even more interesting.
According to one report, Ali Abdelaziz actually swung and missed. He tried to connect, but the punch didn't land clean. The two were then pulled apart before anything could escalate further. So what we're left with is an attempted attack in a crowded backstage area on one of the sport's most beloved coaches on a night that was supposed to be a celebration. And then the silence from the UFC is deafening. Because here's the thing, this is not a random person. This is Ali Abdelaziz. This is someone who is arguably one of the most connected figures in UFC history. His fighters headline pay-per-views. They carry belts. They sell tickets. He is a powerful man inside that organization, and historically, the UFC has been very hands-off when it comes to how managers conduct themselves. But as one reporter put it, there's a difference between fighters acting up and a manager swinging at a coach. That's a line that most people assumed would never get crossed. And now people are asking, what happens next? Does the UFC do anything? Does anyone face consequences? Or does this quietly get swept under the rug? No official answer yet, but the chaos that came after on social media, that was anything but quiet. Because when Sean Strickland found out what allegedly happened to his coach, he went nuclear. Strickland, who is one of the most unfiltered personalities in the entire sport, took to X, formerly Twitter, and absolutely unloaded on Abdelaziz. He made it crystal clear that he would never, under any circumstances, be managed by Ali. He said Abdelaziz could offer him $1 billion and he'd still tell him where to go. He went on to call out Abdelaziz's past, diving deep into some very controversial chapters of the man's history, including accusations that have followed him for years, things that Conor McGregor famously brought up publicly before their fight week years ago. It was messy. It was raw. It was vintage Strickland, and the internet was eating it up. But then, Manel Kape stepped in. Here's the twist. Kape is Strickland's teammate. They train at the same gym. They work under the same coach. And yet, Kape is also Abdelaziz's client. So, he finds himself caught in the middle of a war between his manager and his teammate, and his gym coach. He chose a side, and it wasn't Strickland's. Kape fired back directly at Strickland, saying something to the effect of, "You talk all this online, but you had the chance to say it to Ali's face, and you said nothing." He called Strickland out for being tough on the internet, but quiet in person. Strickland's response? He went after Kape next, mocking him, calling him out, going down a whole road of accusations. It turned into a full-blown social media war between two men who are supposed to be teammates. Two men who share a locker room. Two men coached by the same guy at the center of all of this. The MMA internet could not get enough. Now here's what makes Ali Abdelaziz's situation particularly hard to defend, and why so many people in the sport are raising their eyebrows right now. This is not the first time. Not even close. Go back to 2018. Video surfaces of Abdelaziz brawling in a crowd at a PFL event in New York alongside his client Kamaru Usman. Already, there's a pattern forming. At a PFL playoff event in Las Vegas, Abdelaziz approaches fellow MMA manager Abe Kawa. According to a Las Vegas police report obtained by USA Today, an officer actually witnessed Abdelaziz punch Kawa in the face with a closed fist in a VIP section. A battery citation was issued. Kawa told police he was struck for no reason. Anthony Pettis, who was standing right there, said Abdelaziz slapped Kawa and walked off quickly. Abdelaziz stayed away from the rest of the PFL events while the matter was investigated. And then in 2021, at UFC 268 at Madison Square Garden, one of the most iconic venues in sports, Abdelaziz slapped Dylan Dennis in the face. He was kicked out of the garden. So we're not talking about a man with one bad moment. We're talking about a pattern. A pattern of physical altercations at MMA events. A pattern that people have been watching quietly for years. And now, allegedly, a man who is celebrated as one of the great coaches in the sport was on the receiving end of it. The question that the MMA world is now asking loudly is, how long does the UFC continue to look the other way? There's one more layer here that we need to address because it speaks to something deeper. Eric Nicksick is not a polarizing figure. He is not someone who courts controversy or trash talk. He is the steady, calm professional presence behind some of the most intense personalities in the sport. He keeps Sean Strickland focused. He helped guide Francis Ngannou to the heavyweight championship of the world. He does his job with his head down and his hands clean. For him to be the alleged target, for his name to now be attached to this kind of chaos, it says something about how far off the rails things went backstage that night. And nobody, not even Nicksick himself publicly, has explained what started it. The walls of that Apex backstage corridor hold the answer, and so far, they're not talking. What we do know is this: the MMA community is watching. Fans are watching. Reporters are asking questions. And the UFC is going to have to decide at some point whether a manager taking swings at coaches is something they're willing to tolerate, no matter how connected that manager might be. Okay, let's shift gears now, because there's more happening in the MMA world right now, and it's all hitting at the same time. Let's talk about Sugar Sean O'Malley and his obsession with getting one more crack at Merab Dvalishvili. If you've been following the bantamweight division, you know the story. O'Malley was the champion. He lost to Merab at UFC 306 in a dominant performance by the Georgian Machine. He came back, got the rematch at UFC 316, and this time Merab submitted him with a north-south choke in the third round. Back-to-back losses. Title gone. Critics pointing and saying it's time to move on. But O'Malley? He's not moving on. Here's what's so fascinating about this. Since losing to Merab the second time, O'Malley went back to work. He beat Song Yadong at UFC 324. Then just recently, he went out there and stopped Ayman Zahabi in the second round by TKO at UFC Freedom 250. He's back. He's winning. He's 2-0 after the second Merab loss. And now, even as the division's attention turns toward a potential third fight between Merab and Paddy-Arman, who took the belt from Merab, O'Malley is making it very clear what he actually wants.
He said it plainly. He still wants Merab.
He still believes he can beat him.
Part of him, he says, knows he can.
He knows how those two fights went. He knows what went wrong. And the way he sees it, if he can beat Merab, then his record effectively erases those two losses in a different light. He'd have beaten Paddy-Arman, Aljamain Sterling, and Merab Dvalishvili, three men he considers the greatest bantamweights of all time. But here's the reality he also admits. Nobody really wants to see it.
Even he says it.
The fans aren't begging for O'Malley versus Merab a third time. The UFC isn't rushing to make it. And Paddy-Arman, the current champion, has his own score to settle with Merab. So what is O'Malley's path? He says he has to be undeniable. He has to go on a streak. Win fight after fight after fight until the UFC has no choice but to give him what he wants. And considering he's already 2-0 after the losses and is ranked number 3 in the division right now, that path might be closer than people think. There's also an alternate route he floated. He said a rematch with Paddy-Arman might actually be the biggest fight you can make in bantamweight right now. He beat Yen years ago to win the title. Yen won the belt. A rematch between those two carries enormous weight. He called it, possibly, the biggest fight in bantamweight history. The man is not short on confidence. And he is not short on options. Whether the UFC gives him Merab or Yen, the bantamweight division is about to get very interesting again. And finally, let's go to the lightweight division where the Pimblett versus Arman Tsarukyan situation continues to simmer. If you've been watching this feud develop over the last several months, you know it has been one of the most entertaining ongoing beefs in the UFC, and that's saying something in a sport full of trash talk. Here's the background. Arman Tsarukyan is the top-ranked lightweight contender. He's been fighting his way to the top, earned that ranking, and by every logical measure should have been next in line for a title shot. But the UFC had other ideas. They chose Paddy Pimblett for an interim title fight against Justin Gaethje at UFC 324 instead. Tsarukyan was furious, and he was not quiet about it. And Paddy took the opportunity to twist the knife. He argued publicly that Arman didn't deserve a title shot. He said Arman had beaten Dan Hooker and called Hooker a, and I'm quoting here, bum. He pointed out that Tsarukyan couldn't beat Mateusz Gamrot, refused a rematch with him when it was offered, and then came back and beat a guy Paddy considers irrelevant. He went hard. He went personal. He went full Paddy. The UFC 324 fight happened. Paddy got his moment on the biggest stage.
He fought hard.
He showed his toughness. But Gaethje was too experienced, too calculated, and Paddy ended up losing in a 5-round war that showcased everything great and everything flawed about the Liverpudlian's game. When the result came in, Tsarukyan was right there with the receipts. He'd actually predicted on a podcast before the fight exactly how Gaethje would beat Paddy, called the whole thing round-by-round approach and everything. And after the loss, he mocked Paddy publicly, calling him a trash can, a fighter who is tough, but not technical. And here's what makes this feud so compelling going forward. Both men are now at a crossroads. Tsarukyan was furious, and he was not quiet about it. And Paddy took the opportunity to twist the knife. He argued publicly that Arman didn't deserve a title shot. He said Arman had beaten Dan Hooker and called Hooker a, and I'm quoting here, bum. He pointed out that Tsarukyan couldn't beat Mateusz Gamrot, refused a rematch with him when it was offered, and then came back and beat a guy Paddy considers irrelevant. He went hard. He went personal. He went full Paddy. The UFC 324 fight happened. Paddy got his moment on the biggest stage. He fought hard. He showed his toughness. But Gaethje was too experienced, too calculated, and Paddy ended up losing in a 5-round war that showcased everything great and everything flawed about the Liverpudlian's game. When the result came in, Tsarukyan was right there with the receipts. He'd actually predicted on a podcast before the fight exactly how Gaethje would beat Paddy, called the whole thing round-by-round approach, and everything. And after the loss, he mocked Paddy publicly, calling him a trash can, a fighter who is tough, but not technical. And here's what makes this feud so compelling going forward. Both men are now at a crossroads. Tsarukyan needs a big win to stake his claim for the title shot he was denied. Paddy needs a win to prove he belongs at the elite level even after the setback against Gaethje. Both of them need something. Both of them want to prove something. And the fans? The fans want to see these two in the octagon together. The bad blood is real. The skill sets are fascinating. Paddy with his wild pressure and toughness. Tsarukyan with his wrestling and relentless pace. Whether the UFC pulls the trigger on it remains to be seen. But the rivalry has taken on a life of its own. Online, in interviews, on podcasts, and wherever Paddy and Arman go, they end up talking about each other. So, let's bring it all together. You have a wild, chaotic backstage story with Ali Abdelaziz and Eric Nicksick that nobody can fully explain, but everyone is talking about. You have Sean Strickland going to war online to defend his coach. You have Manel Kape defending his manager and feuding with his own teammate. You have a UFC organization that has stayed completely silent on a situation that many believe requires a response. You have Sean O'Malley, back and hungry, stacking wins and refusing to let go of his obsession with proving he can beat the man who took everything from him. And you have two of the most entertaining and combustible personalities in the lightweight division, Paddy and Arman, circling each other in a rivalry that feels like it's been building toward something. The UFC never runs out of stories. And right now, heading into the second half of 2026, the sport is alive with drama, with questions, and with the kind of moments that remind you why you started watching in the first place. Because MMA doesn't just happen inside the cage. Sometimes, the real fight is in the hallway. And nobody saw it coming.